Hello, everyone. It's so lovely to be here today to kind of express our final projects. So my name is Arbër Qerka-Gashi. I was born and raised in London, but my parents originally come from Kosovo. And I'm a curator, writer, researcher, and somebody that deals a lot with diasporic identity and histories, specifically in relation to the former Yugoslavia and the Balkan region. So, about me, a lot of my own personal practice deals with kind of exploring my own personal identity. So, as you can see on the left-hand side, I write and I research. So, a lot of my own personal work looks at exploring my parents' experiences coming to the UK as refugees in the 1990s, but also more so exploring kind of diasporic experiences and experiences of displacement within my family's history more generally. So I'm originally from Kosovo. My mum is Turkish speaking, my dad's Albanian. So I was raised within a cultural landscape that was very diverse and culturally influenced by multiple factors. This has massively influenced my own personal work. And so stories of displacement and migration have often kind of massively infused themselves within my own personal artistic and creative practice. So I write a lot about that. I also curate. So for the last 2 years, I've been working as kind of an independent curator. I worked with a migration museum in London and produced an exhibition called Inside, Outside, and All in Between, which is all about the kind of experiences of displacement and migration and the tensions that kind of arise out of that experience. I also organize, so I run different forms of collectives here in London, specifically focused on diasporic communities and communities that have experienced forced displacement and migration. And I host a whole range of different events. So yeah, those events kind of include things like workshops. So I was in residence at Goldsmith Centre for Contemporary Arts last year. So I produced a whole range of different workshops. Again, I do a lot of writing that kind of combines a whole range of different practices, whether kind of historical research, but also cultural and anthropological research, and kind of really apply a bit more of a critical approach to the way that histories are presented within a Balkan kind of like research. I also believe it's important to build community through kind of joy and collectivized kind of aspects of culture. So at the top you can see a party that I produced as a part of the Balkan London Collective, where we basically produce parties and cultural gatherings for members of the Balkan diaspora to come together, to eat their traditional foods, to dance their traditional music, but fundamentally in a way that deconstructs and disavows a lot of kind of ethno-nationalist rhetoric. So my project, some background about my project, which I'll lead into after this slide. I founded a online platform, which is kind of like an educational archival platform called Balkanism. Now, Balkanism's root as a term, it was coined by the academic Maria Todorova, and it's all about kind of analyzing the relationship between the Western world and the Balkan region. For individuals who may not know or have heard of the Balkan region, the Balkans is an area located in Southeastern Europe, primarily consisting of ex-former Yugoslav countries, but also Romania and Bulgaria and also Greece. Um, and so a lot of the Balkanism project has been focused at exploring the ways that we can engage in history in an alternative way. Some of you may know, some of you may not know, but the region, specifically the former Yugoslavia, crumbled in kind of in war during the 1990s, which has kind of introduced a lot of ethno-nationalist interpretations of history and identity. And so the Balkanism project, from both the diaspora but also working in the region, it serves as a intervention through to these kind of very problematic interpretations and readings of Balkan history and cultural identities. So through the Balkanism Project, we host a whole range of different events, but we also produced a publication in 2024, which you can see down here, called Diversity is Strength. And it was all about focusing on the ways that diversities within the Balkan region, but also in their diasporas, can be cultivated as a source of strength rather than also be a point of contention as they're often presented. So this leads me on to the next iteration of our publication. So the next iteration of our publication is tentatively titled Rooting Solidarities. Rooting Solidarities is all about kind of building upon the foundations of the first issue. It's about interpreting Balkan histories and identities in an alternative way, providing an analysis and representation that actively strives to deconstruct a lot of ethno-nationalist interpretations of Balkan histories, and also just provide an alternative space for those individuals who want to hear these alternative stories of solidarities from our region and their diasporas. So, like I said, as a natural development from the first issue, Diversity is Strength, this publication seeks to explore, question, and represent the following. What does solidarity mean, and what does it look like in the Balkans and across their global diasporas? How do we build solidarities within contexts and communities that have experienced genocide and profound state-sponsored violence? Which examples from Balkan histories and cultures can be evoked to further a narrative that supports solidarities between these communities? The fundamental goal of the issue isn't to provide a neatly packaged kind of formula to solidarity, if that makes sense, because of course solidarities can exist in multiplicitous ways in a whole variety of forms. The fundamental focus is to see what is already happening within the Balkan landscape, both in the region and the diasporas, and weave that within a physical publication form to get people to see the alternative ways that we can build solidarities between ourselves as communities. So going into methodology, clarifications, and approach, Rooting Solidarities employs artistic, scholarly, and archival explorations and interventions to expand how solidarities can be built in both regional and diasporic contexts, particularly among communities shaped by historical and present-day experiences of violence, displacement, and inter-ethnic strife. As somebody that has studied about the region for the last 15 years or so, as somebody who also descends from the region, the fundamental focus of this publication is not to romanticize the situation, to provide almost like a plaster on situations and say, this is how we should approach solidarities. The fundamental focus of the publication, again, is to engage in these conversations and say, these are kind of our contexts and our historical baggage that we have to deal with collectively, but also individually. How do we build upon that? How do we acknowledge that, but then also strive for more just futures and inclusive representations? So again, our methodology is centered on disavowing and deconstructing ethno-nationalism, and this is articulated through a deliberate critique of exclusionary, violent, and highly heteronormative ideologies that promote mono-ethnic, anti-pluralistic, and segregated societies. So within the region post-Yugoslav wars, there's been a real kind of implementation of highly segregated societies. You have communities that share similar ethnicities or completely different ethnic and linguistic identities going into the same school building. For example, examples in Bosnia or Kosovo are very adamant, completely segregated within different classrooms, both learning completely highly nationalized interpretations of history that cause so much more division between communities that share so much culture and identity amongst each other. And I also think it's important to kind of clearly identify different types of nationalism, because as we see through history, different forms of nationalism have also been forms of liberation for different communities. And so Balkanism's interpretation or Rooting Solidarity's interpretation of ethno-nationalism is all about the way that it exists within the region that's often focused on defining communities through a very fixed lens, and often using violent means within society to implement a societal notion that is based in that is based in exclusion rather than inclusion of different communities. So as a project, we very much recognize that different national movements have also been very important to the development of these communities as well. And so, yeah, going on from that, we very much are focused on placing experiences in their rightful context and will not provide a space for romanticization through a careful and socially engaged curatorial approach, one that acknowledges regionally entrenched forms of discrimination as well as tensions within diasporic communities. The project brings together multidisciplinary works that ask how solidarities can be built and sustained. It invites reflection on historical and contemporary examples of solidarity within the region and their global diasporas. What forms have they taken? Under what conditions have they flourished or fractured? And how they may be reimagined and strengthened for the past and present and the future. Next. Rooting Solidarities and the Balkanism project more generally operates within a clear intentionality. While we create spaces for open exploration of ideas and expressions and conversations, we unequivocally reject fascist ideologies, notions of mono-ethnic societies, and any narratives that perpetuate harm towards our communities, both in the region and its diasporas. This has often been a conversation, and one that we've definitely had during the entire mentorship program, about positionality, about bias, about kind of experiences in the way that we curate the platform. And kind of this mentorship has been very integral in allowing me to kind of accept the fact that I do have a positionality. I am working from a very specific lived experience, and this is something that massively weaves itself within the work that we produce at the Balkanism Project, but also within Rooting Solidarities as a project itself. Now, individuals are very much open to critique and engage in conversation with us about these ideas, but we very much hold a positionality that we are completely anti-fascist ideologies, and we will not provide space for these narratives to exist within our publication, within our platform, but also the community spaces that we build. Because we, as communities that have obviously experienced different forms of displacement and genocide, we just simply won't allow that to exist within our space. So Balkanism, the Rooting Solidarities project is very much a project in development, but these are some of the individuals that we've commissioned to be a part of the project itself. So these are artists and writers and communities that are involved. Rooting Solidarities will feature work from both commissioned contributors and those who submitted through our open call. We strive to democratize access to inclusion in the publication and will ensure that both diasporic and regionally based contributors are fairly represented. Because again, Balkanism as a project isn't one that explains the Balkan region or Balkan experiences to those in the region itself. It is one that is very much a collaborative experience and project. And so we strive to ensure that individuals in the region are very much represented. So confirmed contributors so far include Jelena Sobrinovic, the Balkan Solidarity Network, which is based in the Balkans, Emily Stevenson, so yeah, we've got Nurgeta Shala, Balkan Queer Collective, Natalia Stefanovic, and the Non-Aligned Archive. So these are contributors that are currently producing work for our second issue. So this is a specific piece that's being written by Jelena Sobrenovic, and it explores a specific refugee camp that was based in Egypt called Al-Shat. And this was kind of like a part of Yugoslavia's non-aligned kind of experience. There were a whole host of anti-fascist fighters that were given refuge within this specific refugee camp in Egypt during the Second World War, or just after the Second World War. And so her piece explores through the lens of this refugee camp, the experiences of solidarity that were built on a transnational level between communities in Yugoslavia and in Egypt. And it offers a very interesting perspective, the way that communities were able to build that level of solidarity during wartime, during the Second World War. So she's currently in production of this piece. It's something that I've just recently read the first draft of, and I'm really excited to see how it further develops. We also have an essay by Emily Stevenson, who is a Bosnian Jewish woman, and her specific essay will look at Muslim and Jewish solidarity in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the Second World War. So the image that is displayed in the background is an archival one, and it depicts in Bosnian tradition, so Bosniak communities are Muslim communities in Bosnia, and specifically in the capital city, Sarajevo, it has a very profound history of being a very multi-religious space. And during the Second World War, this specific image was very substantial and also very poignant because it depicts a Jewish, Sephardic Jewish woman. And during the time under Nazi occupation, a lot of Jewish women were expected to, and Jewish people were expected to wear the Star of David. And this specific image is very symbolic because you see the Muslim women, which would over their face, they would have the niqab, or in the Balkan region, it was called the fereja. And she is very tactfully using the fereja to cover the Star of David on Zainab's arm. So these are kind of stories of solidarity that that Emily Stevenson will be focusing on and exploring the way that different communities, whether religious or ethnic, were able to build that level of solidarity within the Balkan region at a time that was very profoundly violent. So she's currently in production of this piece. And so expected release for the publication is September 2026. We're currently in the phase of artist selection. So like I said, we definitely had an open we have an open call. I recently checked today, the deadline's next week. We've had about 100 submissions, which is really fantastic, but obviously gives me so much more work to do, which is really great. And so currently right now, I'm not the designer itself. I work as the editor-in-chief. And so the designer is currently kind of conceptualizing ideas for the design itself. So exploring the way that we can weave in kind of representations that kind of relate to Balkan nature. As a Balkan region, we are very much connected to nature as communities and physical space, and kind of like also building that through an archival method as well. So combining these through a visual kind of language that really explores and identifies Balkanism as a project, but also very much the Rooting Solidarities project. So yeah, this is the current team structure. So myself as editor-in-chief, we've got the graphic designer, Verica Petrovic, we've got design support from Terrain Brown. Fundraising is obviously a big issue for our projects and something that we have to focus on, Michelle Homan. We've got two editors, Tamara Vinovich and Yonila Krasniche, and also creative writing editor, Habiba Sultana. And potential collaborative bodies within both the Balkans and Britain, because that is really much, that is my kind of approach. The British Library has shown interest, the Kosovo National Library, the Barabar Centre in Kosovo, and the Sekme Institute, among others. Currently, we don't have secured funding, but we've currently been in discussions with a range of different organizations in the region and also in Britain for financial support in producing the magazine, because as we know, print publishing tends to be quite expensive. And so, yeah, this is to end where I'm at now. With Rooting Solidarities, we strive to provide a tangible alternative that Balkan communities in the region and across their diasporas can physically hold in their hands, another way to engage in histories and cultures and their identities that acknowledge oppressive systems, striving to break them down, all while imagining new futures. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.